Hello everybody, the Lawn Gnome is here, and this is Up From the Underground presents football. While you have heard me speak about many things such as film and pop culture and music, this is another thing that is a true passion of mine, and I'm quite happy to have a panel here that is going to help me with this pilot episode, and also hopefully in the fall we're going to actually continue and do a whole show based around following 2012 to 2013 football season. So before we actually begin the topics at hand, I want to introduce my panel. The first person to my right is one of the people that has actually helped me with my videos in crazy recordings, especially the latest introduction on my Season 2 episode of Star Wars, Captain Shenanigans. Gary, how you doing?
Hey everybody, how you guys doing?
And the person to his right is someone who you have heard many times mentioned in my videos. He is the one that edited my videos and basically put me onto the YouTube scene. Ladies and gentlemen, the Notorious Mr. Beagle, Alex, good evening.
Hello, everybody. Hello. That's not my real voice. I just wanted to play it up.
All right, so let's begin, guys. Now that we have our introductions, the 2011-2012 football season. The season that almost never happened.
The final case here is that the owners tended to be very greedy because they said, okay, we have the best market in the country. This is the most popular sport in the country. It's more popular than, at least it was, more popular than basketball and baseball. It was more popular than baseball, soccer, and hockey combined. So the owners thought, oh my God, we're just getting so much money, especially from the networks. And then they decided, hey, maybe we should get a little more. So the collective bargaining agreement that they agreed upon many years ago kind of shafted the players as it got later and later. And the players rightfully wanted to restructure it, and the owners didn't want that. So they locked out the players. They said, you can't practice, you can't play until we get more money. And the players said no. And the players had every right to do so because they were getting shafted. Yeah, the big names like, you know, the Tom Brady's, the Aaron Rodgers, the Maurice Jones-Drews, they were getting, you know, the high bucks. But the mid-range players, you know, the middle linebackers, some of the cornerbacks, the offensive linemen, they weren't getting, you know, the mid-range players, they maybe make, you know, $800,000-$900,000 a year, which for an NFL player is not a lot of money. For a normal person, that's a lot of money. But for an NFL player, you got to come up with the money for a personal trainer, for conditioning coaches, for strengthening coaches, and it just eats away at you. And I read stories of a lot of players who had to take odd jobs. One of them even filed for bankruptcy just because that they weren't getting paid. They weren't allowed to practice, weren't allowed to play. So the players said to themselves, hey, if you don't have us, you won't get any money. And eventually, they won out. The collective bargaining agreement that was agreed upon basically stipulates that the players will get the same amount of money they did last year, but as in the next 3 or 4 years, their share will slowly increase. Shares from the TV sales, shares from licensing deals. I mean, they were getting almost nothing for the jerseys. So basically, it works out much better for the players, and it actually works out pretty well for the owners because it's just going to raise more awareness of the fact that the NFL is the most popular sporting league in America right now. And it's just going to get more popular, especially with international interest. This game every year in London that they hold, I think in 2012 was the Patriots and the Rams.
Yeah, but you want to know something? I'm still trying to understand that, and maybe I can let Gary finally get into the conversation here. I appreciate everything that you said, Alex, but one of the things that I'm really surprised is, I mean, that's something that really doesn't grab my attention. I don't understand why they're trying to do this on a global scale. To even consider putting together a franchise itself in England and possibly even host a Super Bowl in England. Like, do you really think that is it goes back to what happened last year when they tried to extend the season to 18 games. And on that note, with the season that we actually had this year, you definitely saw a lot that affected these players because of the lockout. We had a lot of injuries. And a lot of players who were supposed to have some really great seasons ended up not having anything. But anyway, your thoughts, Gary?
Considering the whole London idea and that having a Super Bowl or having a yearly game, but the very idea that you have a franchise in London is, I don't want to say frightening, but it's a little disconcerting because you already have the fact that you have East Coast teams playing West Coast teams, and that's just a 4-hour difference, 6-hour difference. Already, you know, people are saying, the home team is already going to have the advantage. You know, what if, you know, someone from a future LA team or San Diego or Seattle has to go all the way to London to play, let's call them the London Monarchs, right? Cool, why not? I mean, it's crazy. What time are they going to show the games? Are people in Seattle going to be able to watch the game at 4 in the morning?
I agree. I think it's going to take just so much on a marketing perspective and a fan base perspective and a ratings perspective. I mean, why would I want to get up and watch a team that early in the morning? Because I know another place that's really building a huge fan base for American football, it's actually Israel. But I don't know. I just don't understand why these countries can't put together their own leagues and rather have our league be the one that markets and landmarks the whole thing.
Funny you should say that, because a while ago, this is going back about 10 years ago, there used to be a league in Europe called the World Football League. And they did have teams in Spain, in England, in Germany, one in Russia. It was less of an independent league and more of a NFL development league. They had their own season, and they played their own version of their Super Bowl. But it collapsed a while ago because the NFL didn't have the need for a development league anymore, because they used the college, basically, as the D-leagues. But I remember they had the London Monarchs, the Rhine Fire, oh man, I forgot the Spanish team, but those were the perennial favorites to win the league every season. And while football in Europe is soccer for us, North American football was still popular. The stadium still sold out whenever they had the WFL playing. If they want to do that again, that's perfectly fine. Hell, I'd even watch that on ESPN The Ocho,
Getting back to our season of this year, the season finally takes off, and I have to say, we probably had one of the most exciting seasons in football, and we've said this throughout the year in our own regular discussions as we're all watching the games as a group of friends. This year was no doubt the year of the quarterback. There were some crazy things that happened with the ones that you knew were going to do well. You had some things happen to the ones that practically collapsed on themselves. We had a crazy rookie class this year, and that's where I actually wanted to open up the floor here. I want to talk about someone who we were constantly debating about, myself and Gary. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts about this year's rookie, Cam Newton? Alex, let's start with you.
Well, he definitely has the skill. I mean, this is a guy, a Heisman Trophy winner, won the national championship at Auburn, and has proven time and again, on and off the field, that he has a win. He definitely has the skill set, and he has this swagger about him. I mean, right now, it's the middle of February 2012. Right now, the entire NBA is talking about Jeremy Lin.
Yep.
Okay, because of his superb skills, his cool under pressure, and his professionalism. That's exactly what Cam Newton did. His team, the Carolina Panthers, it's a small market team. They don't have a very good track record, but because of Cam Newton, he revitalized the veterans on that team. He helped build the young guys on that team, and he doubled the wins. He more than doubled the wins for the Carolina Panthers this season than from last year. I think he's the real deal. I think that if you give him 4 or 5 years and build a team around him. You already got your wideout core. You already got your offensive line. The Carolina Panthers just have to work on their defense. They're due for a second Super Bowl trip, probably 2015, 2016.
You're absolutely right. And you never know. It can come sooner than later. But I totally agree with you, Alex, on that. I think that he came in. I actually was very interested to see what he would bring, especially because of the swagger that you spoke about. But one of the things that really impressed me about him is that when he had those press conferences, especially when they were having the slow start to the season, how he said, it's not about me, it's not about how many yards I get, it's about me and my team winning. The fact that he put the team in there and how his focus was on the team. And because of that, they didn't have the most fantastic of seasons, but they actually did have a very good season, and he definitely has made a staple for himself on that note.
I want to emphasize the point you made about the team. If you look at the comparison between him and Tim Tebow, both are quarterbacks that rush for touchdowns. If you watch the Tim Tebow rushes, you watch the Cam Newton rushes, most of Cam Newton's touchdowns come on fakes. They come on play actions, so it depends on his teammates selling the run, selling the screen, and it psychs the defense out. And that's what gives Cam Newton the ability to run in for a touchdown, and that's the team. The second thing I want to mention, I don't think it'll be before 2015 or 2016 that the Panthers reach They might reach the playoffs. I don't think they'll reach the Super Bowl, and this is mainly because of the division they play in.
Right.
They need time for Drew Brees and Matt Ryan to kind of get older.
Wasn't it you that actually said that it was going to be the Falcons that were going to the Super Bowl this past year?
They had a really... Yes, I did predict that the Falcons would win the Super Bowl this year. And they had a really, really good team. The problem was that they fell apart, and they were not very well coached.
I will wholeheartedly agree with you. That coaching was just despicable. I mean, you're allowed to make a mistake every now and then coaching. I mean, you're not going to be perfect. You can't be perfect, especially when coaching football. You got to take chances here and there and hope they pay off. But the coaching decisions that they made this season were just absolutely ridiculous.
But we also have to give some honorable mention to the other quarterbacks that came out this year and really proved themselves. You got to talk about people like Christian Ponder, who played for the Vikings this year after Donovan McNabb literally collapsing in on himself. And how about Skelton? But I think probably the most impressive and surprising quarterback as far as the rookies go was definitely Andy Dalton. Someone who really lifted a team like the Bengals, who I thought had virtually no shot in going anywhere this year because of what happened to them in the previous season. And I have to say that this guy practically wowed me, and he just worked with so many of these go-to guys that he needed to get these wins, and they made a great playoff run, especially when they're in the division of the AFC North with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. But on that note, I think the major quarterback that pretty much swept the nation, and that's why I'm really happy that we have Linsanity, because we're not living in football withdrawal these days, Tebow Mania. I'm going to have to give this one over to Gary over here.
Oh, boy.
Because this is the guy, if you want to ask about Tim Tebow, was I a firm believer? I was having to admit that his games were exciting. And they were really interesting to watch. And the fact that they beat up on a crippled Steelers team to actually go up against the New England Patriots in the second round of the playoffs was quite shocking to me. But you have been talking about Tim Tebow since the Florida days. I give you the floor, sir.
Since the Florida days, indeed. You know what? The whole idea of Tebow Mania, it's someone who is savvy with the media. He's a nice guy. He seemingly does all the right things. You know, doesn't necessarily mean you have to like the guy, but you have to respect the guy for what he's done and what he's accomplished so far. I had my doubts years ago when he first came into the league. You know, he had just won a national championship with Florida, and he had just lost one. You know, the defense they had down in Florida was a spread offense. It was, at times, ridiculous looking. I mean, you had to wonder at what these defenses he was playing against, what they were thinking when they let him rush, when they let him pass. You know, he made it look easy. And that's why I think people are starting to hero worship him, is that he makes these 20-yard runs, and he makes these 80-yard passes that are Hail Marys and miracle throws. You have to admire at least that amount of talent, you know? Not saying that, it's all about Tebow. The rest of his offense was not too shabby either. Once they got their act together, they were able to put it together and make a playoff run. You know, and considering the fact that they beat up a very, very crippled Steelers team.
It was really Roethlisberger's fault, just because of the fact that when you have an injury like that, you got to give yourself some time to recuperate and rehabilitate yourself. Otherwise, you're going to do what you did, and you let Tim Tebow, who people were, as much as they loved him, there were definitely people out there that just wanted to see him fail.
Oh, yeah. There's always going to be people out there who want to see the heroes of any sport fall down, whether it's LeBron James in basketball, or Alex Rodriguez in baseball, or Claude Giroux in hockey. You know, there are guys you just love to hate, and Tim Tebow is a lightning rod for the love or the hate, depending on which way you want to look at it.
Well, I'll be the first one to admit that I am a Tim Tebow doubter. I don't think he has what it takes to be an NFL quarterback in the long term, although he is working out on his throwing abilities. This whole Tebow Mania thing, it just strikes me as weird. The problem I see is that here's a guy who's completely unorthodox, okay? He's not very tall, but he's a
6'1",
solid
yeah.
240.
Yes.
It's all
That is
muscle.
massive for a quarterback.
Oh yeah, it's running back size.
Yeah, it's even big for a running back, honestly. And so here he is, an unorthodox body style, an unorthodox motion, an unorthodox play style. This Team Tebow guy on the Denver Broncos, he's going to encourage a whole slew of young players to not learn the proper skill set, because he's going out there and proving that you can make it without doing things the right way. And I just don't think that's a good example for our youth. And furthermore, the way he's playing, John Fox adapted his offensive game to suit Tim Tebow's play style. And he said he did it, why can't college ball work in the NFL? Because it's two different leagues. Because the game is played differently. The difference between college and the NFL is you're actually getting paid to play the way the fans want to see. The fans who love Tebow and who say, "But I love watching this game because it's different," I think they're just delusional, because it's not going to last. You're not going to see another quarterback come in and play like this for another 40 years at least. So when Tebow is done, fans are gonna, eventually go back. I think it's just an aberration. I do not think it will last. I actually think Tim Tebow will be out of the NFL in 4 to 5 years.
Wow, that's a very bold statement. Hey, you know what? Let's see what happens.
Yeah, actually, I can agree with everything you said. You know why? Because if there were truer statements than what you just said, I will eat my shoe. Lightning rod. You either love him or hate him. Right now, most people are still, I don't know if you want to call them doubters, but they're definitely on the board about what he can do or what he can accomplish. And like you were saying before, the very idea that a head coach had to change the game plan, basically, to not just revolve around Tebow, but to actually cater to what he can do. And I'm not meaning that in a good way, because he's very limited in what he can do. It's a dangerous prospect, and if the Denver Broncos don't win now, they're not going to win.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's no John Elway. I mean, for crying out loud. But truthfully, I'm just one of those types of people that does root for the underdog. I just admire the fact that, I like the fact that there's a very positive role model in the game. I know that one of the other major controversies is the fact that he brings, his religion and his beliefs onto the field, but I still feel that that's neither here nor there.
That's been happening ever since sports has existed.
But he's the one that the media is just eating it up with a spoon. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm a firm believer in the underdog. I would not mind seeing exactly what happens. I feel that you're going to see a major change in the way people play, especially from a quarterback standpoint, how they're going to work with their team and work with the players that they have to use. And I feel that there is a good chance that we may see him improved based on the training that you'll see. So I don't think he's going to be ousted. I think that he's actually going to come back next year a very different player. And you know what? He may, in fact, surprise us again. And people may, in fact, at the end of next season say, "Wow, I never knew that Tim Tebow could actually play football."
I like to rephrase my statement slightly.
Okay.
I think Tim Tebow will be out of the NFL in 4 to 5 years if he does not improve this season. I think he'll be out of the NFL as a quarterback. You might see Tim Tebow come back to the NFL as a full-time running back. Oh. He's got that Brandon Jacobs power on through strength, and he can do it.
Okay, so before we do our individual segments, there's one last thing that I do want to bring to the table, and that's the surprises that we saw this year besides Tim Tebow. I'd like to call this one Manning squared. He was asked, "Do you consider yourself an elite quarterback?" And he said, "I think so." Words can't describe. I'm flabbergasted with what I saw in this guy. And on that note, we also saw the other Manning completely a no-show for the season due to surgery, and we saw this team that won a Super Bowl with him at quarterback virtually implode. We saw these two brothers, and we'll talk about two other specific brothers before this little segment ends, but that was probably the biggest surprise this year for me. The Giants, the way they performed, with a guy that was practically called out to make a statement about himself, and he did it modestly, next to his brother, who unfortunately couldn't show up, and we saw what happened with his team. Let's talk about a team like Texas.
That's my surprise right
Texas
there.
was
The Houston Texans, a team that I actually said to you guys, you didn't believe me.
No.
I said that they were going to take the AFC South. Not only did they take the AFC South,
They won it in Week 15.
they got there with a third-string quarterback. What do you say about that?
I'd like to say that the Texas coaches are some of the best in the league. Kubiak is a quarterback's coach. He started out in the NFL as a quarterback coach.
Okay.
I think that the quarterback, and Matt Schaub's been in the league, 6-7 years already?
He's still he's seasoned now, but he's not as old as the other guys.
He's not old.
Rookie anymore.
No, but he's been a Pro Bowler. He knows what the story is, despite the fact that he's spent his entire career on a losing team. Then he had Matt Leinart, guy who hasn't really has much playing experience, but definitely is older and is a veteran presence. And that's where TJ Yates got all of his skills and abilities and confidence in. They put him in, not because they didn't have a choice. They could have signed, they could have traded for Carlson Palmer. But they
I'm happy that he did play.
TJ Yates had the confidence in him because the coaches said, you're our guy. But when Yates came in, Johnson was still out. But when you have three great running backs, Foster, Tate, I think Derek Ward.
I think it is Derek Ward.
Derek
yes.
Ward. And Pro Bowl tight end and Greg Olson.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not to mention Kevin Walter, who had a breakout season.
Mm-hmm.
He's been underrated his entire career, and he finally showed people what he could do when Johnson was out. It's a great core to build your team around. And with Wade Phillips coaching the defense, even with Mario Williams out, it still put up some of the best defensive numbers the NFL has seen in 10 years.
All right.
And when you have that kind of confidence on the entire team, just the aura of confidence, as soon as you walk in the locker room, you know these guys are good. You know they're well coached. That puts so much confidence in a new quarterback. You just go out there and prove what you can do without worrying about it.
The final surprise that I want to talk about, and I definitely know that Gary's going to want to jump in on this one, I want to talk about Jim Harbaugh and the San Francisco 49ers.
Oh.
Here's a guy who comes fresh out of the college scene from Stanford, correct? Yes, with Andrew Luck, of course. We'll see where he goes next year, along with Robert Griffin III. But Jim Harbaugh comes out on his debut on a washed-up San Francisco 49ers team. A team that has a legacy in names like Steve Young, Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, and the list goes on. He turns this third-string caliber quarterback of Alex Smith and this unbelievable core defense. Run with it, Gary. Take it. What were your thoughts?
All right. My first thought entering the season is, the media especially gave a lot of attention to Harbaugh. He was hailed as the new coaching messiah, come out of the promised lands to lead the 49ers to victory.
Yeah.
And to an extent, he turned around a terrible, god-awful team.
And this was actually the first year since the Seahawks that we actually saw a team with a winning record going in on the NFC West side. I actually thought the Rams were going to go there. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah,
That's what I thought.
Listen, again, at the beginning of the season, everybody predicts losing seasons for the NFC West. They're easily the worst division in football right now. Easily. Most years, 6 and 7 enough to win the division. 7 and 9 enough to win the division. We saw a couple of years ago the Seahawks with a losing record sneaking backwards into the playoffs because they won a terrible division. And all of a sudden, predictably, the Seahawks, and the Rams, and the Cardinals, they all have losing seasons. And then here you have the 49ers, and they're 12 and... Right?
13 and 3.
13 and 3. 13 and 3. Where did that come from?
And we definitely were. And look, I wasn't believing it. But then you saw them going up against some of the best teams in the NFL and winning.
Yeah.
So that was what was really starting to make me a believer in this team.
Someone must have sold their soul, or actually, maybe, crazy thought here, maybe they actually improved the team. You never know. Because, look at it. Alex Smith has been terrible his entire career. Everybody says, if he doesn't get this last chance, boom, he's out. And very surprisingly, I think this is one of the biggest surprises of the NFL season for me, was watching Alex Smith play like an actual quarterback. We've never seen anything like this from this guy before. Totally surprising, and I think it took everyone else by surprise.
One last question. Speaking back to Jim Harbaugh, let's talk about his brother John Harbaugh. Those two guys are the ones that were the losers in the AFC and NFC championship game.
On the same day.
On the same day. And we saw how they lost. Let me ask you guys a question. The Patriots and the Giants going to the Super Bowl when it very well could have been the Ravens and the 49ers. Luck or just complete carelessness on any given Sunday?
I think the Ravens missing it was just bad luck for the Ravens. It was a good snap, but it was a bad plant, and Cundiff just shanked it.
And what about the pass that was literally slapped out of his hands? Because I am still thinking that he actually had possession and he had that touchdown. I really swear to you, on the grave that I may put my mother in someday, that guy had that ball for more than 3 seconds in bounds.
You know, you can swear that all you want, but it doesn't matter what happens. It matters what the ref calls.
In truth, you can look at the replays over and over and over again as many times as you want. And while you personally may see something, again, it's up to the refs. You know, they see what they want to see, and they'll call it like they sees it.
You know, it's funny, because you're mentioning both those games, and the GOATs of both those games, Cundiff and the return guy for the 49ers, Kyle Williams, both received death threats.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that we all need to understand, people. And please, if you're listening and you want to leave a comment or a video response, please put them in the box below. We'll definitely be reading them and responding. It's just a game. I mean, yes, we're all fans. The three of us sitting here, we're Jets fans at heart, and if you notice, we haven't even started to talk about the Jets. We're going to save that for August when we start talking about the preseason. But it's a great game. It's entertainment, but there comes a point in life where you just have to remember that it's a game. Life moves on. And even though you may feel that you will never see your team win, I mean, it's just about being in the atmosphere and being in the moment. If you just stay positive and not send death threats to your players, because believe me, that's not going to help them, and that's not going to help the self-esteem of the team.
Well, you know the word fan came from, right? Fanatic.
I don't know. I mean, look, when I saw the Jets literally collapse, I was angry, but, the next day I woke up and I really didn't feel too terrible. I mean, look, it's, as long as the apocalypse chooses to pass us by, we'll see the Jets win a Super Bowl eventually. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to start now is pretty much a little bit of a taste of what we're going to see when the actual show takes fruition. Remember, this is a pilot episode, so bear with us. Each of us does have a topic of conversation that we are going to bring to the masses. I do what's called Hero and Bust, in which I actually talk about the one player that practically uplifted the entire season, its team and its fan base, and the bust, which is the one that practically was someone who we should have seen do more, but ended up doing much less than he did, and that's pretty much where I go. With Gary, we're going to do Lessons Learned. It's a little comedy perspective based on what we have learned in these past couple of games. And
Shuffle.
And for Alex over there, we've got Get on the Boat and Get off the Goat. And pretty much, you're going to basically see the true statistician come to life here. So I'm going to start with Hero and Bust of the 2011-2012 season. We're going to start with Hero. Now, I could easily go with a guy like Eli Manning, based on what I said earlier, but I'm not. The person that I want to really give this award to for the last season is a guy who I'd like to say redeemed himself this season, and I feel that if he didn't get his injury this year that practically threw him out for the year, I think that team would have continued being a posable threat and possibly making a very good playoff run, possibly even getting to the Super Bowl. And I'm talking about Jay Cutler of the Chicago Bears. Because last year, he's in that playoff game with the team that ended up being the Super Bowl champions, Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. He gets this injury, which really didn't seem so excruciatingly horrible, yet he chose not to play, and he sat. And because of what he did, people believed that he was just, a real wimp. He practically lost his quote-unquote man card, if you will, and no one really knew what was going to happen. Like, this guy was suffering from major head garbage going into this new season. And you, Gary, were pretty much telling me that you agree that the Bears had way too much head garbage, but this year, even though he has a terrible offensive line, he really came through with the weapons that he had in Knox, in Forte, and Hester. If it wasn't for that injury, he really, I feel, has gained his respect. I think they gave him his man card back, and I seriously feel that as long as he is healthy next year and they do a couple of improvements on his O-line, I think that they are going to be a true threat in the NFC North. Your thoughts? Start with you, Gary?
I'll agree with you in that at the end of last year, Jay Cutler was not the man. He was not. I mean, people say, oh, he gave up. He just sat down and said, to hell with it. I don't care what happens. And that's, for all intents and purposes, that's exactly what it looked like. And over the offseason, you didn't really hear about him. He didn't do anything extraordinary. He didn't do anything out of the ordinary. He did everything that he previously did. And he comes back this season, and I think one of the major driving forces was that his entire career, people has told him, you give up, you quit. You don't put 100% in if you don't feel like it. And I think this year he wanted to prove everyone wrong. He wanted to say, okay, we got this far last year. If I really tried, maybe we can do even better. I'm not going to say it was a great season for the Bears, but it was definitely up and down. But the ups were definitely an improvement.
I mean, the whole NFC North minus the Vikings were all over 500 teams until Cutler unfortunately had to leave.
And that's the first time we've seen it, that division like that, in almost 10 years.
Right.
Whether or not the Lions can improve next year, I think they can. Everyone wants to see, everyone likes an underdog, and right now the Lions are an underdog. But they finished off the season with a squeak, and they didn't enthrall me during the playoffs at all, in the least bit. And can the Bears, if they get their act together, and if Jay Cutler can stay healthy, will they pose a threat to the Lions? Because we all know the Packers are going to be number one in that division for a long time already. It's really up to the Bears and it's up to the Lions to make an interesting wild card race between the two of them for the division for the next couple of years. Hopefully, it will be.
Alex?
I have to agree with everything you guys said. And don't forget Earl Bennett when he came back from suspension.
Right. Yeah.
When Bennett came back for the 2 games he was back with Cutler, they had a great rapport. I think he had 80 yards the first game, 110 the next game, and then he got hurt, and then Bennett didn't do a damn thing.
Yeah.
But a couple of things that have to be learned from this Bears team. One, the offense is so potent, you just got to protect Cutler.
Exactly.
You give him 4 or 5 seconds in that pocket, and he'll get that ball. He's got the best arm in the NFL. He's got
one of the
maybe
best.
Maybe not the most
Debatably so, I think.
Not debatable.
Really?
The strongest arm in the NFL.
Really?
Arguably.
Better than Aaron Rodgers.
Strongest? Yes. Rodgers more accurate.
Tom Brady?
Tom Brady?
Not as strong.
No, not as strong.
Doesn't really have.
Not even in his.
That's a very bold statement. I really do not agree with you there. I really do not think so.
Cutler can throw the ball the entire length of the field if he really wants to.
Okay, I don't disagree with you as far as him not being strong. I mean, I do believe he's strong, but I just don't think he's as strong as the other guys that I mentioned.
I think his arm is not as accurate. That's where you might be getting confused. But as far as brute strength, as far as throwing the ball downfield, very, very strong. And he's got 2 very, very fast receivers. He might overthrow them once or twice, but normally he won't. The defense, anchored by Urlacher and...
That's my boy.
Not Suggs. Suggs in Baltimore.
Briggs.
Lance Briggs.
Lance Briggs.
And what about Peppers?
Peppers, thank you.
Had an improved season.
Much improved season. The defense is solid. They have a really good young cornerback course in the secondary.
I think another thing that I have to say about Cutler before I move on to my bust is you definitely saw that he was, forgiven because after him getting injured and they suddenly realized that they had no plan B. When Forte got knocked out and they didn't have even a plan B for him, that's where you saw that Lovie Smith was kept, and I think he's a great coach for that team.
I agree.
And their administration was cut because it said it wasn't Smith's fault, it wasn't Cutler's fault, you should have had a plan B, it's your fault.
I'd like to say two more things about this Bears team. One, you don't kick to Devin Hester.
Agreed.
And two, Matt Forte should be the highest paid running back in the NFL. The numbers that these guys put up was just incredible. Matt Forte especially. If he would have stayed healthy throughout the entire season, he would have set an NFL record. He was on pace to shatter it. An NFL record for most receptions by a running back. I mean, this guy could do everything. Run with it. He could catch it. I even think that he returned a couple of punts.
And we'll move on to the bust. I'm not going to say Santonio Holmes, just so you know, even though I can say many different things about Santonio Holmes at this point in time.
Go on and on.
The bust that I want to give this year, I have to give it to Donovan McNabb. And he laughs. But let me explain why. And as far as Donovan McNabb goes, I know that Gary's going to want to jump all over this like a fat kid on a cupcake.
All over it.
Here's a guy who played on a very well-coached Philadelphia team by Andy Reid, even bringing him to that Super Bowl against the New England Patriots, which they had a very good chance of winning. Let's not forget the fact that Super Bowl was won by Adam Vinatieri.
Oh, yeah.
I practically could taste the champagne and clutch the metal of the trophy in my hand, and I let it slip away by that much. To not even be able to get back to that level, back to that point where you had a second chance of getting it, and practically go on a decline to the point in time where you're thrown off of Philadelphia, you can't even improve a crippled Washington, and after what happened in Minnesota with Brett Favre, and you can't even improve that team because you had a great team in Minnesota. You've got Adrian Peterson, the best running back in the game when he's healthy. Agreed. You can't even get at least one win, and you have to be benched to let Christian Ponder, a rookie, give them a formidable season. And the best part is, you're cut. And not even Chicago wants to give you a phone call when they're in dire need of a quarterback. The question that I want to give to you guys, and I'm going to again start with Gary, is what happened to this guy?
Oh, man. What happens to everyone? He got old, he got fat, and he got lazy. As a quarterback, you can't be fat, and you can't be lazy. You have to be not only mentally sharp, you have to be physically sharp. Donovan McNabb lost that edge that he had when he was on the Eagles. As terrible as the rest of the team was, he was their lone and shining star for a while. And he did things that other guys couldn't in his position on the Eagles. Once you get to the point where even Andy Reid is calling you fat, you know you've got problems. He got chucked off of Philadelphia, like you said, and he was signed for an asinine amount of money in Washington. He shows up to camp, and he's overweight, and he doesn't want to learn the playbook, and Shanahan is saying that, he can't learn the playbook because he doesn't have the mental capacity to do so anymore. He got so stuck with the whole idea of, okay, I'm the star of the team, let's revolve the offense through me. What happens is that he doesn't have the power, he doesn't have the ability to make these plays anymore. And with, like you said, a very crippled and terrible Washington Redskins team,
absolutely,
it just made his failures that much worse because the spotlight was on him. Then he got sent to Minnesota. He was taking over a pretty decent Minnesota team. And he takes over the Minnesota offense and does absolutely jack crap with it. Mm-hmm. It's embarrassing to watch him play. And every time he gets a snap on offense, you cringe. You literally cringe and you kind of shut your eyes. You're like, oh crap, what's going to happen? And you're disappointed every single snap, and that's why they decide to bench him, and that's why Christian Ponder got his start.
It wasn't just that; it was also because of the fact that McNabb was afraid to pass.
He
basically was showing his own mortality because he couldn't pass the ball. He constantly was trying to give it to Peterson.
He inherited the title of Captain Checkdown. You stand in the pocket, you're afraid, and you keep checking, and bap. Sooner or later, you get smacked upside the head, and you're on the ground, and you're wondering, why did I not throw the ball?
Now I want to leave the floor to Captain Shenanigans with his lessons learned of the 2011-2012 season. As you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a little segment I like to call Lessons Learned. Now, why do I call that? Because every time you watch a football game, you're always talking with your friends later on, or you're on the internet forums, and you say, well, I watched the game today, and this is what happened, and this is what I feel should have happened. I'm going to tell you, you're all wrong. No, but in all seriousness, what happened this past season? We saw some super surprising things happen, and we saw some truly disappointing things happen also. First lesson learned. We're getting back to the Manning debate. My first lesson is, the NFL can only handle so much Manning. There can only be so much Manning talent in one NFL season. As proven, Peyton got his 3 and/or 4 neck surgeries, and he was out for an entire season. And look what happens. Eli has not a career season, but he takes the reins of a team and he leads them to a Super Bowl. I'm not going to say single-handedly, and if anybody does, you're wrong. That was a team effort, but he truly was a leader. And that leads me to my second lessons learned. This is the year of the quarterback. I don't care what team you're on or what team you root for, your entire offense, your entire game is going to be run through your quarterback. Be it Carson Palmer or Donovan McNabb, Christian Ponder, Eli Manning, Tom Brady. Name any quarterback you want, any starting quarterback, any third-string quarterback even, as proven by the Texans this year. Your hopes and your dreams rely not solely upon them, but basically upon them. And you see guys like Donovan McNabb fail in Minnesota, and you see guys like Carson Palmer trying to get his career back in order on a halfway decent Raiders team. And you look at guys like Manning, who led his team to a Super Bowl, Alex Smith, who led his team to almost an NFC championship, Flacco and Brady. They both got to the AFC championship, and Brady won the game. But you look at it and you got to say, okay, if I'm on a crappy team, what do I have to do to kickstart us again? You have to get a quarterback. You have to get a quarterback, and you have to spend the time and the patience in order to get his skills in order, learn the offense, get a rapport with his receivers and his running backs. You got to have time to learn the offense. They say offense sells the tickets and defense wins the games. This season, not so much. You saw a lot of offensive plays that won a game. That's on to my third lesson learned, is that if you don't have a defense, you're not going to do well against the good offensive teams. Case in point, this year's Patriots were, by all stats, a very good team. They rolled through the season, it was a cakewalk for them, and they get to the playoffs, and they play the likes of the Denver Broncos, and they win that game with ease, and they go and they play against the Ravens, who are known for their defense. And what happens? That is one of the closest games, besides the 49ers-Saints game, one of the closest games you saw in the playoffs. Down to the wire. What happens is that the Patriots didn't have the defense. That was their problem. People say, oh, Belichick, he's defensive-minded. He won the championships through defense and Spygate. And if you disagree or if you have anything to say about that, comments, I want to see them.
Yes, leave the comments.
Yes, I'd love to see those. But this year, yeah, they won on almost pure offense. They didn't play a team with a winning record until the playoffs. All those wins in the regular season were against not so good teams with not so good defenses. And then they play the Giants in the Super Bowl, who weren't particularly known for their defense, but they had some name players, and they were on a roll defensively and offensively. And that wraps up to the second and third lessons learned rather nicely, I think. On to lesson number 4. Ladies and gentlemen, this Seahawks entire season was all about ruining your day. Specifically you. I don't care what team you're rooting for. Even for the Seahawks. They were there to ruin your day. Their season was so much of a roller coaster that I felt like watching replays was like I wanted to puke sometimes. It was ridiculous. There's no other way I can explain it. Their entire game plan seemed not, okay, let's run, this play and see what their defense comes up with. It's, okay, let's run this play and do it 10 times over and see if it works. Their defense was the same way. They were there to ruin your day by not doing the unpredictable, not doing the predictable, but just being the Seahawks. And you saw some games against the Giants that they played, and they won that in one of the more ridiculous fashions I've seen recently. It was a combination of poor offense and poor defense on both sides of the ball for both teams. Again, they had a losing record, and most times that record would have been enough to win the NFC West. They were there solely not to get into the playoffs, not to win games, but to ruin it for other teams who had chances. My two friends here, they're laughing, and that's the point. It's supposed to make you laugh.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, you always remember that you do not gallop as a victory celebration when you're on the field.
No, that was... Oh, man, I could watch that replay
I don't even
all day
remember
long.
who did it, but it was very early in the season, and that was
Yes.
definitely one of the funniest things I ever saw.
Nor do you do a trouble shuffle to inspire your team.
No.
No.
I saw that, and what? What was that?
Well, something, it could have been that, or it could have been, pretending that you shot yourself in the leg, or landing up on a football and flapping your arms,
that was
we definitely saw a lot of those really stupid antics. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Weren't they both Stevie Johnson?
no, one of them was Stevie Johnson, and the other one was Santonio Holmes against
Holmes.
Philadelphia, which he had no reason to do whatsoever because that team got trounced by
man.
Philadelphia that day.
Yeah. One last lesson.
last,
I want
okay.
to talk about dynasties. And this is a very touchy subject for some fans, and I know this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, whether you want me to or not. Dynasties. Watching the NFL for, let's just ballpark it and say, the past 10 years, right? You look at the dynasties of the past 10 years, and you have teams like the Colts, and you have teams like the Patriots and the Steelers, right? And notice how they're all AFC teams also, because the NFC teams have been, historically speaking, for the past 10 years, weak. And you say, okay, Pittsburgh, they won a couple of Super Bowls, and Indianapolis, they've been to a couple of Super Bowls. They won one under the direction of Peyton Manning. It was against a very surprising and terrible, in my opinion, Bears team down in Miami, where it rained for the entire first half. And you look at teams like the Patriots with, what was it, three wins in 5 seasons?
Yes.
3 wins in 5 seasons.
All by 3 points.
All by 3 points.
Thanks to Adam Vinatieri.
All by 3 points, yes. Okay, so what happens? All 3 of these teams, 2 of them make the playoffs, 1 of them makes the Super Bowl, but none of them won the big title. None of them won the Lombardi Trophy. None of them was able to dance into the end zone and take their jerseys off and put on those neat and swaggy t-shirts and those hats. What happened? It's called the collapse of dynasties. The end of a dynasty. In terms of the Colts, Manning didn't play this season. They didn't have, half the team from the last time they went to the Super Bowl. What's happening is that they're in the middle of a decline. They're not, they don't have the players anymore. They don't have the direction from Manning, who in my opinion for the past 2 seasons has been basically coaching the Colts. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, they won a bunch of Super Bowls, and what happens? They get, I don't want to say trounced, but they definitely lost to a very surprising Broncos team. Their defense is older. Their offense isn't as careful anymore. What happens is that I don't want to have to say they have to start rebuilding, but they definitely have to get their priorities straightened. They have to get their act together, and then maybe in a couple of years they'll get back to their winning ways. But right now, there are much stronger teams in their division, and they're just going to have to accept the fact that they're not the once dominant powerhouse they once were. Let's look at the Patriots. 2 Super Bowls they went to, and 2 Super Bowls they lost to Eli Manning and the Giants. Totally, I would say totally different from the last team that went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Giants, and totally different from the last time they actually won a Super Bowl. What's the matter? It's a decline. Tom Brady's getting older. He can't do everything by himself, or so his wife says. I mean, they have 2 great players in Rob Gronkowski and Wes Welker, but that's not enough anymore. They have to start getting rid of the older players. They have to start shaping up and conditioning their newer players. They have to go back to the draft and start from scratch. Very much like what the Colts are trying to do. They've already got a head start with a 2-14 season. So, you know what happens is that these three teams are going to pass, not into obscurity, but they're not the dominant powerhouses anymore. Right. You got to look at teams like, hey, I'm going to say it right now, the Giants. You got to look at teams like the Falcons. They may not be altogether there, but they're getting there. And once they do, they're going to be winning Super Bowls left and right. That's my opinion. You got to look at the Packers. People were screaming for dynasty at the beginning of this year. This year, close enough, but they were playing a Giants team that was on a roll. You got to say, listen, the time for some teams is over, and the beginning for some teams has just begun. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Don't forget to leave your comments for lessons learned. And now we're going to move on to Alex's segment, Get on the Boat or Get off the Goat. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
This segment is it's not so much about one person or about one team or about one thing. It's about something, things in general about what I think is, it's kind of like stocks. The boat is something you want to put your stock into. The goat is something you want to sell immediately. It's kind of like ESPN's buy or sell.
There you go.
If you subscribe to them on Facebook, they have this thing every once in a while.
Or another fantasy player.
Yeah. So my boat for 2011. Well, there were many pleasant surprises this season. You got John Skelton, Julio Jones, Andy Dalton, Aaron Mabin. They all performed spectacularly, and not many people thought they would. The most obvious choice for me, and it may be a little cliche, it's got to be the New York Giants. I mean, I'm sorry. There are so many parts of this team that went under-evaluated and underappreciated. First and foremost would be Eli Manning. The New York Post had it right. You can't spell elite without Eli. So to answer the question, yes, Eli is an elite quarterback. Not because he puts up gaudy numbers, but because he just leads his team to win. The man proved time and time again that he has what it takes to hang with the Breezes and the Rodgers and the Brady's. He just makes the right decisions. Another part of the Giants, Victor Cruz. Everybody's like, this guy came out of nowhere. No, he didn't.
No, he was injured the entire season before.
I'm sorry. I'm not saying about his abilities, which are clearly strong. But a preseason 2010, he gets 3 touchdowns in a preseason game against the Jets, a Jets team that ended up going to the AFC Championship game that year. He went on IR before Week 1. I guess that's why people forgot about him. And then there's Hakeem Nicks, the man with the quickest hands in the NFL, as proven by this video. Check it out. The rest of the Giants offense, you got Super Mario Manningham, one of the most sure-footed receivers in the league, and a great tandem of Ahmad Bradshaw and Brandon Jacobs. I mean, yeah, the Giants were last in the NFL in rushing, but that was only through Week 15. You have to understand that Bradshaw and Jacobs traded off injuries, so neither was healthy until Week 15, and that's when the Giants started to win again. Thankfully, the Giants are developing this new guy, C.J. Ware, who's actually had a pretty decent season as a third stringer. Jake Ballard has its ups and downs, but he's proved he's still a good tight end, both receiving and blocking. And so is, I love this guy's name, Bear Pasco. What a great name for a tight end. The O-line is a who's who of offensive Pro Bowl tackles and guards. Defensively, Canty, Tuck, Pierre-Paul, Umanura, Blackburn, Roll, Webster, Ross, Grant. I mean, come on. All of them worked together fantastically to give opposing quarterbacks fits. If they didn't see an open receiver in the first 4 seconds after the snap, they knew a sack was coming, and more often than not, they couldn't escape. How is this team a boat? Think about this. The Philadelphia Eagles were the favorites going into the season, not only to win the NFC East, but the entire NFC. ESPN actually put the Giants as taking third place behind the Eagles and Cowboys. When they made the playoffs by 9-7 by spanking the Jets and the Cowboys in consecutive weeks, they destroyed the Falcons and then traveled to frigid Green Bay to face the defending champion 15-1 Packers. And they won. Decisively. Then they went to San Francisco to face the 13-3 49ers. These are both teams that had at least 4 more wins than they did. Then they went to San Francisco to face the 13-3 49ers and Coach of the Year, Jim Harbaugh. And they won. Not decisively, but they still won. A win's a win, no matter how it comes. Then the Super Bowl. Now, did anyone really think the Giants would lose this against the Patriots? I mean, come on. The Giants won the regular season meeting between these two teams, and the Patriots made one huge fatal mistake in the Super Bowl. They gave the ball back to Eli Manning with time to spare. You just don't do that. In the Super Bowl era, there were only 6 quarterbacks that you can't do that to. Dan Fouts, Dan Marino, John Elway, Joe Montana, Brett Favre, and Eli Manning. Aside from Eli Manning, the aforementioned 5 quarterbacks have all had at least 40 fourth-quarter comebacks in their career. So there you have it. The boat of 2011 is the New York Giants, simply because no one thought they would do anything given their roster, what happened last year, and the expectations of the other NFC teams. I like to make honorable mentions, the guys that I was thinking of, the guys or teams I was thinking about but didn't quite make it. I like to say this.
Honorable mention.
Yeah, honorable mentions. The Baltimore Ravens, because they beat the Steelers twice. Tim Tebow for defying his critics and myself. And finally, the Seattle Seahawks for continuing to develop their team. Notice, they didn't take a single step backward. And even Tavares Jackson, at times, looked like a legitimate quarterback. They would have won the NFC West had it not been for Jim Harbaugh, Frank Gore, and Patrick Willis.
Well, what could you say about Charlie Whitehurst?
I'd rather not. And my GOAT. Oh boy, you two are going to love this one.
I'm excited. What have you got?
Let's see. So many disappointments this NFL season.
So many.
The Philadelphia Eagles, Albert Haynesworth, Kevin Kolb, Donovan McNabb, and pretty much any type of football in Florida. The most glaring GOAT to me, however, is my hometown New York Jets.
Ooh.
Not since the 98-99 Portland Trailblazers has there been such a mishmash of player egos and lack of camaraderie. Wait, they do have a guy named Camaraderie.
Yeah, you're thinking about camaraderie.
Well, I maintain that the step backwards that Mark Sanchez took was due to a lack of a real offseason, because of the lockout. It doesn't excuse his poor execution. The entire team was poorly coached and executed poorly. From the O-line debacle of Wayne Hunter and Colin Baxter, to the drop passes of Santonio Holmes, to the excitement and disappointment of Plaxico Burress, and the fumbles of Sean Green and Joe McKnight. The offense was a mess. Routes were mixed up, Sanchez was a statue, and teams just got the offense way too early. They just killed him. Defensively is a little better. Aaron Maben coming over from Buffalo, that was a pleasant surprise. He led the Jets in sacks. That's pretty sad when a middle linebacker does that.
Yeah.
A few key injuries down, kind of doomed the Jets offense, like Jim Leonard. Mangled early in the year, Brian Thomas.
Yep.
It just proves how shallow the Jets' bench is. I mean, Wilkerson was a nice addition, but the D-line is just too slow. Puha and DeVito, they're very skilled, but they're just too slow to hang with the increasing quickness of the offensive linemen these days.
And you saw that when they played Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't get anything.
Yeah.
Secondary, primarily featured as the biggest asset on the team, played pretty well, but not well enough. When Stevie Johnson, who, I know, right, could torch Darrelle Revis for over 100 yards and a touchdown, what kind of tone does that set for the rest of the team? Finally, the coaches.
Oh boy.
Okay, Mike Westhoff is a legend, right? I mean, he's been everything in the league, and he is a genius when it comes to special teams.
That's what the media tells me.
Yeah, you got to get a guy who won't fumble the returns. They had 7 this year. 7. It's inexcusable. The departure of Brian Schottenheimer is a welcome change for most Jets fans. He's not terrible. He just doesn't know how to do it with this quarterback. And I like Tony Sperano a lot, but he's been in the NFL, 12 years? He's called offensive plays one of those years. In 2006, he called it for Dallas. And then there's the big guy. Literally. Rex, do me a favor, put the bacon cheeseburger down. Your team has no chemistry, is full of egos and young guys who act like veterans but not on the field. And your coaching staff is all mixed up. You have a chef waiting tables and a secretary making executive decisions. Instead of blustering on about winning a Super Bowl, how about winning the division first? The Patriots will be in your way for the next 15 years if you keep this up. As bad as it all was, I'll say this much. Rex Ryan has job security. He's a perfect New York coach. He's big, he's loud, he's blustery. Now, if only he'll develop into a perfect football coach. I'm sorry, they just underperformed in every single aspect the entire season. My honorable mentions, Philadelphia Eagles. Enough said. Florida football. I don't even know where to get started there. Although the Dolphins kind of look promising towards the end of the season. So I like where they're going to go. Minnesota Vikings. Yeah, your franchise is a mess. From your stadium to your general manager to your fans to the city of Minneapolis itself and their stagnant government. See you in September 2013, Los Angeles Vikings.
Ooh.
Damn.
Wow. That's wow.
Not even.
If anyone
Los
from
Angeles.
Minnesota is listening to this, I would love a video response right about now.
Oh boy.
Or Los Angeles.
Or Los Angeles. How would you feel, Los Angeles, if you got the Vikings, or if you got the ex-Jacksonville Jaguars?
Well, that ain't happening, especially since
No.
Jacksonville officially renewed the team. Go Blaine Gabbert. Let's see what you can do next year.
Yep.
Well, I very well said, Alex. Very well said. And I'm very impressed that you actually used the two New York teams for your boat and goat this year. Very impressed. But I have to disagree with one specific thing that you said. You said about New England being ahead of the Jets for the next 15 years.
15 years.
I feel
I'm not
that
discounting Miami.
I just think that Miami has a good chance to capture the division if they actually keep going in the direction that they're going.
If Miami captures the division, the Jets will still be behind the Patriots.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like don't discount Miami. I think that you're going to see Philly definitely redeem themselves close to the end of the season, and they were really starting to click as a team. So I really think that they're going to be a big team to watch this coming year. Miami has another one, and I do feel that we're going to see a lot more, health-wise permitting, from the Oakland Raiders.
I agree with you there. Although,
could be.
it really depends on where Michael Bush ends up. If he
Right.
resigns with Oakland, which I don't think he will, but if he does, then McFadden has a safety net. And honestly, I think a 1-2 tandem of Bush and
McFadden.
Bush and McFadden is
great.
much more deadly than Bradshaw and Jacobs.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
I would
So we'll see what happens
Or Jackson
there.
Spiller.
As far as teams that really have disappointed the living piss out of me, like I would love to see what happens next year.
Your piss lives?
Yeah, believe it or not, it does.
Does it talk to you?
As far as things that we're going to see this coming season that disappointed me, I'd like to see what happens this coming season with the Buccaneers, the Panthers, the Colts, of course, especially if they're going to end up getting Andrew Luck, and especially the St. Louis Rams, because even though they had a terrible season, I still feel that Sam Bradford has one of the best forms as far as being a quarterback. He passes very well. And I have no idea what I just said.
Because you just said Sam Bradford with St. Louis Rams. They have one huge crutch. Brian Schottenheimer. Ew.
That's right. So that's another reason why I'm intrigued by the Rams. You didn't even have to mention
Brian
that.
Schott.
And forget about this year being the year of the QB, alongside, of course, that people like Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin III are going to be the two topics of conversation.
What I'm wondering is whether or not, before the season begins, the Jaguars will trade Maurice Jones-Drew.
I think that would be a mistake.
I don't think so.
Really?
I think that the Jaguars, because they got renewed in Jacksonville, I think they have to rebuild now because they got a brand new quarterback, they got a brand new coach, they need a brand new everything else. Their defense is good and strong. It's their offense, and their offensive line is good and strong. It's their offense itself that needs to start gelling together. And with a veteran running back and a rookie quarterback, that's especially Maurice Jones-Drew, who is the number one rusher in the NFL right now. The Jaguars can get a lot for him. A 2 or 3, a 3 or maybe a 4-team trade will get you a good cornerback, a good offensive line, maybe even another backup running back like C.J. Spiller, who proved that he can handle stuff. And I think that he can get a lot for that team. If they trade him, the problem is the salary cap. There's always the problem
Right.
with that.
Well, that's exactly what's going to
Maurice
happen.
Jones-Drew is very, very highly paid, so he'd have to go to a big market team. If Minnesota does end up going to LA, I don't think it'll happen this year, but I think it will happen. Then that's a big market, and that's a good place for Maurice Jones-Drew.
Wow. As far as this year being the year of the quarterback, I think that this coming season is going to be the year of the coach, especially with all the coaching change that happened these past couple of weeks and what we'll probably see in the next couple of months before the season rolls around. So anyway, that wraps it up for this pilot episode Up From the Underground Presents Football. I'd like to thank my panel, the Notorious Mr. Beagle and Captain Shenanigans, for joining me tonight. Be prepared because we will be coming back with a much more condensed program. featuring the first week of preseason, in which we are going to talk about Sports Illustrated's predictions for this coming season, and that is where the three of us are going to literally pick them apart and give them their just desserts, as we always love to do. So before I leave, the question that I want to leave for you all today is, we talked a lot about quarterbacks. I'd like you to send a video response or a comment along with all the other comments you probably sent or did not send over the past hour or so. Who do you think are the three best quarterbacks in the NFL today?
Ryan Leaf.
For the Notorious Mr. Beagle and Captain Shenanigans, I am the Lawn Gnome saying goodbye, and remember that actions speak louder than words.
Where's the light switch?
On the outside.
What? That's stupid.
Okay, this is
the last
okay,
time
ladies and
that
gentlemen.
was.
You will not see this, but this will be in the gag reel.
We're having a gag reel?
Why not?
I'm actually going to give you this file to you mark down where you want edits.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to go through with it.
Okay.
I really don't want to go through it, and it's
That's
all
fine.
you make it.
That's